True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. Thank you for all of you who are rejoining us. I know I have not been able to do a podcast for about a week, and I'm so excited to be on and actually talk about the Delphi case. For those who haven't ever been on the channel before, this channel is about fact. I was an FBI agent for 25 years and 28 years a special agent in the government investigating cases. So this channel comes to you strictly through that lens and from that perspective. I also wanted, because I think it's important, I was a firearms instructor from 1994 until I retired in 2016, and still teach firearms to this day to civilians throughout the country. So having said that, I really want to dive into the Delphi case. The Delphi case, for those of you who have not followed it and are new to it, two little girls, Abby Williams and Libby German, were murdered. They were actually had their throats slit in Delphi, Indiana, back almost now 7 years ago. On February 13th. They were found February 14th. And it was a case that just absolutely befuddled law enforcement. First of all, there was a recording made of potentially the person who took their lives. He was recorded in audio saying down the hill. We found out during trial. The trial now has been going on for well over a week. I think we're on day 11. Correct me if I'm wrong, folks. But essentially, it's been going on now for days, and we've had a lot of testimony. We first found out that the audio and video was enhanced. That doesn't mean that it was altered or changed, but in this case, it sounds like to some degree it may have been altered or changed. I tell you, I don't know how you all feel, but this is so incredibly almost impossible to follow a case like this where different social media, YouTubers, people on Twitter are actually in that courtroom in limited numbers, and they're trying to follow the case. They're not allowed to live tweet, so they're taking notes of all this testimony and what's going on in that courtroom. I'm very grateful for them. But the problem with this, not having any audio or any video, having everything shut down by Judge Gohl, who made the decision that there will be no cameras, there will be no streaming, there will be no audio, there will be no devices in that courtroom, is it severely limits what is really happening, particularly since we are looking literally through the eyes of who is giving it to us. So just think of the fact that we can never accept in court secondhand information. It's hearsay. That's what we are all doing. We are, if we're not in that courtroom, we're not seeing it for our eyes. And you can see, I mean, looked at a lot of different statements and YouTube podcasts. And it's frustrating to me because depending on their slant, whether it's for the defense or whether it's for the prosecution, it's very hard to find a true middle ground. I know I called Brian Inton and I was like, Brian, please tell me you're going to Delphi. He said he's not. I always know with Brian, I literally am getting vanilla. I hate to say it that way, but it needs to be that way in crime. For somebody like me or many others that are speaking through a lens of analyzing the facts as they come, that's different. You know, we're going to have an opinion. Actually, I hope you all have an opinion, because people like you in this audience right now, you are what make up jury panels. I'm never going to be on a jury. I will be kicked off that jury faster than you can say, Delphi, because a defense team will never have a former special agent, FBI agent on the stand or in their jury. So in any event, I always love to hear what you all have to say. And so I look for that after every podcast. But focusing in today on where we're at in the Delphi trial, there is something that has come to my attention that I was just so motivated. And I said, oh my gosh, I have got to get on to discuss. If you actually look back at my Twitter, for those of you who follow Twitter, I'm at Coffin Daffer FBI, but I posted a long time ago when the original affidavit was done regarding the search warrant and arrest, really, of Richard Allen. And that affidavit, now knowing what I know about this bullet information, I don't even think has probable cause in it. And I'll tell you why. The problem with the bullet information is this. They had an expert on the stand that is a tool mark expert who has said, and I don't deny she's an expert, but the issue with the testimony is this. The only way that they could match the tool marks, and I'll get into that, to Richard Allen's gun was when the bullet was extracted and ejected from the ejection port by firing. That was something that was never mentioned in that probable cause affidavit. And it is a huge, huge point. Just got off the phone with one of my friends at ATF, and we were cutting this up before I got on. Totally agreed. This is a travesty. And I want to explain why. First of all, the power for a bullet to be ejected out of an ejection port when it's been fired is huge. Those gases, the heat, the energy that's created makes a very distinguishable mark on a casing. Now, I have a bullet here. I apologize because this is not a .40 caliber. I'm actually not at my house where I have my arsenal. So I only had a 9 millimeter bullets here. This is a full metal jacket round. Hopefully you can see that. In other words, there's nothing Halla pointed it out. This is really a practice round. This is a round that people in law enforcement use when we're on the range. It's a less expensive round. It has less ballistic capability to hurt somebody. It has, this is the bullet, and this is the casing. Inside the casing, this is what they call a casing. It encases the bullet. It's gunpowder down here. And when it's in the chamber, and I can't put a gun on here, YouTube would ban me, but hopefully you can all see this. This is actually a 6-hour P226, just like the gun Richard Allen had. Okay, and circled there is the ejection port. So this bullet would be in here and get ejected out of the gun. Now, what happens is an extractor grabs the casing, and then the ejector actually pulls it from the gun through the ejection port and flips it out of, let me make this bright. Oh, that's my kid, sorry. Flips it out of this, hopefully that glare isn't on there, that port, okay? So when they say tool marks, that's what that means. It's the marks from the ejector and the extractor on the casing, okay? Now, the big question of the day and the confusion that I've seen, this is not even close to the exact matching capabilities of, say, a fingerprint. It's also not even close to matching to a DNA sample. DNA and fingerprints, as long as the fingerprints have enough points, and the DNA is able to be analyzed, can be perfectly matched and basically exclude everyone else to that match. That is not the case with extraction and ejection marks. Now, they can say it's close, they can say it's a near match, they can say it's similar to, like characteristics, they believe it matches, but it's not identical. And this is the piece that absolutely stunned me in court. Absolutely stunned me. The examiner was not able to make an ejector or extractor mark on the casing except by firing. Huge problem. In fact, I would argue that that would make it unlikely that it's his gun. Why do I say that? Because for a gun to make such specific markings when it is ejected and extracted without being fired, in other words, manually taking that slide, pulling it back, and having that bullet eject from the port, low velocity, right? It's just the movement of your hand that's causing that ejector and extractor, not the power, the force, the small amount of time as when you shoot a bullet and it quickly ejects, right? They couldn't duplicate that. They couldn't duplicate that. That tells me that the gun that likely was able to do that, that had such specific markings on a manual ejection, is still out there, because that examiner should have been able to match the markings without having to fire that gun. Why? Because it made those markings when it was manually ejected. Hopefully that's clear to everyone. I'm stunned. And I'm so hopeful that Rosie and Baldwin have a true expert that's either ATF, FBI, have even better credentials than this individual that testified for the prosecution to say what I just said, because I think that's what they're going to say. They're going to say, nah, we could not make it. Now, they had a metals expert, meaning the defense had a metals expert, FBI trained metals expert. And Judge Gohl, and I think this will be one of many appealable points, would not allow the testimony. Now, if she wouldn't allow it, and I do agree with this, she said, you didn't examine the gun. You didn't examine the gun. You didn't examine the bullet. This is a big error, and I've been, even though it was very upsetting that Baldwin's office, and I want to make it clear because I've gotten a lot of, kind of bounce back in my support of Rossi and Baldwin because those pictures were leaked. But I want to make it clear that they were in Baldwin's office. They should have been more secured. They were on his conference table. He had allowed somebody in his conference room that was trusted. No idea. It's been sworn to. And actually that person already served his 6 months or whatever he got. That he took pictures and then fed them to somebody who then fed them to, social media creators. It was terrible what happened. But to throw somebody off the case, I thought was wrong. Just being somebody who has been in war rooms and you have this conference room and you hide everything and you have everything tucked away in folders and, it's a little bit different in the Bureau. We don't allow anybody in. Like, we lock it up, and if that's your war room, and that's what Baldwin should have done. He didn't do that. But back to my main point, and this is this is one of the things I've seen that I'm very critical on, because I don't understand. And if somebody else saw the motion, maybe I didn't see it. I never saw the motion to have the gun and the bullet examined. Now, I could have missed it. This has been one of the most concealed cases, difficult to get your hands on, there's been so little transparency, so much digging, all the sleuths dig. It's been difficult. So if somebody knows of that, please let me know. But I didn't see it. And that was remiss of the defense not to have the bullet and that gun examined. And I'm so worried that if they have a tool mark expert, and if they didn't get that gun and a bullet for the tool mark expert, we know they didn't for the metal expert. If they didn't have it examined for the tool mark expert, they might not even get to have a tool mark expert to talk about what I just talked about, which would be horrible. It would be a miscarriage of justice, because I think that bullet is going to convict Richard Allen. And personally, for me, I'm not convinced he did this crime. I'm just not convinced at all. I want to be convinced. And what do I mean when I say that? Somebody misunderstood kind of how I said that. I meant that I don't want to see anybody that is innocent going to prison, and he's probably going to be going to prison. In fact, he's been in prison, which is a whole nother point I want to touch on again. Let me look at this. Oh my gosh, Thomas, thank you so much. He just gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much, Thomas. You've been so generous to this channel. Thank you so much. But back to what I was saying on this bullet, and thanks again. This will be so remiss if that tool mark expert was not able to examine that gun and was not able to examine the bullet. Talk about remiss, though. Let me go into a little bit more that was remiss. How could this tool mark expert not examine and compare other markings from other 6 Sauer P226s? And for that matter, from other law enforcement that would have been on scene. I know the testimony. They all testified. We had Glocks, or we had some other makes, some other models. It was unclear to me whether they meant 2017. Surely they did. Again, I'm seeing reflections of what people are writing. It seemed unclear to me. The other thing was, did they have personally owned weapons that could have been SIG P226? I can tell you, 6 Sauer was carried by the FBI. I know the FBI was out there. I'm not trying to blame this on them. Many law enforcement officers love SIG. Did anybody have a personally owned weapon, not a weapon that was issued to them through their department? Did anybody else? All those questions to me either weren't properly answered, or I'm not seeing it properly relayed, because I can't believe she did not test other bullets through like guns to see if any other guns matched. I'm at a loss for that. The bigger piece I'm at a loss with, as I said, was she couldn't even duplicate it through a manual extraction. She had to shoot it. That's huge. Now let me go on to point 3 about this bullet. This is so big. There were 3 sets of ejector and extractor marks. 3 sets. This bullet, not this bullet, his bullet, probably this bullet, had been ejected from a gun manually 3 times. 3 times. So 1, it seems the day that Abby and Libby were killed. 2 other times. Now, I'm going to tell you that is so rare, except among law enforcement. It's not at all rare amongst law enforcement. Why? I kind of explained earlier, right? We shoot with two different kinds of rounds. We have our service rounds that we put in our gun when we're getting ready to go into battle, right? We're armed. We want to make sure we have a helipoint. We want to make sure the grain is about 190 grain bullet. That's the other thing. What grain was this bullet? The grain could tell us so much. In other words, how big is this bullet? Is this a law enforcement bullet? Or is it more characteristic with a layman civilian bullet? I haven't seen the grain. We only know the caliber. Was it jacketed? Was it halopointed? Where are we with this bullet? Again, I know for the reporters and everything, if they're not shooters, I just haven't seen that specificity. And of course, unfortunately, we can't see the exhibits to show us what was documented on that. We had FD 597s on that inventory. For instance, if I were going to document this gun, I would say a Winchester 9mm full metal jacket round, 160 grain. That's how I would do it. So I can specifically say that's this bullet. I hope they did that. And I hope that the audience is able to look at, or not the audience, the jury, because maybe somebody on that jury knows about guns. Maybe. I don't know. We don't know who all is on that jury. But it's important because normally people, and I have instructed firearms since 1994. Now, from 94 until 2016 was state, local, and federal agents or law enforcement officers for the most part. But once a year, the SWAT team we taught, and firearms instructors, we taught civilians because we did actually twice a year. We did it with family one time, and then the other time we taught civilians that were part of our, what we call the national, it was like not an academy, it was a citizens academy. Sorry, that's the exact word, citizens academy, where different citizens can come in and actually go through FBI classes and learn about how the FBI does things. And then on the last day, we take them out and shoot. And as a firearms instructor, I would shoot them, so civilians. But then when I retired from 2016 to present, that's almost all I teach. Now, believe it or not, I've had SWAT guys come through my class because they want to brush up before a training or something like that, which I always laugh. I'm like, listen, you should be up here helping me. But they're always great, and we have a great time. But what my point is with all of this is we eject rounds all the time because we clear our gun, and then we reload it to shoot on the range, and then we unload it to put our halopoints back in. And that happens a lot. And so you'll see, as I said, this gun, I can visually see without a microscope. I can see my markings from the many times that I've taken it out. I haven't shot it yet, right? That is not what civilians do. First of all, ammunition is expensive. Now, in 2017, when this occurred, it was pre-COVID, so you weren't paying $50 for a box, because that's what happened during COVID. It went up to $50, $60, $70, $80 a box. I was teaching. I felt terrible for my students. It was horrible how much ammunition was. But nevertheless, it's expensive. And the other thing is, your students want to shoot. Your students don't want to eject and not shoot. Now, one could argue, yeah, but they're gun nuts, so they sit on their couch and eject. No, not in my experience. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's not probable. When I first heard that round had 3 sets of markings, I immediately thought law enforcement, because we change in and out. from service to practice rounds. So many people were on scene there. I want to say this, and I'm going to be really excited about this. I just talked to this person today, and they want to wait till after the trial's over because they're actually worried they might be called. But I'm going to have somebody on that was on the initial scene. And anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'm going to have them on. And I can't wait for your questions and everything. Unfortunately, it's going to have to be after trial, which I totally respect, to talk about a lot of this. But there were so many officers and law enforcement milling around that scene, civilians who actually found the bodies initially. This is a mess. What about any of the civilians? And maybe again, it came through on the stand and I didn't see it. Were any of them armed? Were any of them asked whether they were armed? Because I got to tell you, if I'm in these woods, for those of you who have seen these Delphi woods near the Mononai Bridge, I would have been armed. I'm out there looking for 2 missing girls. And I'm thinking, what could have happened? Could have this been an animal? Who all was out there? And were their guns tested? I can tell you this, their guns weren't tested. They gave their word they didn't have that kind of a gun. But did they have a personally owned gun? And did they have any ammo in their pockets, otherwise have ammo? I'm just saying you have to, if you're doing a good, proper investigation, you have to eliminate those possibilities. Investigations are all about eliminating possibilities and getting down to probabilities and then getting down to this is beyond a reasonable doubt. I can't get there yet. Today was a big day, right? I've been watching, I've been listening, I've been looking at what everybody has to say about these confessions. Okay, I want to make sure I'm done with the bullet before I digress. I think I am done with the bullet. I want to talk about these confessions. We always knew Dr. Walla herself needs examined. I'm going to say it, like she needs to be examined. She was literally the lead psychologist. I wrote that down verbatim for the Indiana prison system. And she's diving into Delphi. She's in groups, chats, communicating, talking, interjecting her thoughts, listening to other thoughts. She's in Facebook groups. She's in all these social media groups, YouTube. Dr. Walla, you need your head examined. How in the world could you betray your oath, trust by doing that? How in the world do you think that could make you objective? Then, remember, it's really her, the one. I think the date was in April. I think I wrote down the exact date. April 5th. Sorry, I killed the girls, he tells her. I was a sex addict. Okay. Let's just stop right there. Number one, they might not have, apparently, the phone that he had on February 14th, 2017. By the way, they had the chance to have it because he walked in and said he was there. I mean, that's the time to take people who said they were there that were males that matched even close to that description of bridge guy. That's time to take their phones and say, listen, we're going to duplicate it. We're going to image it. We're going to give it right back. We'll have it back to you tomorrow. That's the time to do that for everyone that they knew that was there that matched that description. So just absolutely, I'm not a cusser, but crappy police work. But no, now they say they've got, over 2 or almost 24 guns of his, but they don't have that one, right? You show me, and maybe it'll come up and I'll eat my words. I'm the first. Like when I mess up, I'm okay, made a mistake. Where's the child pornography? Where is it? Where's his sadistic killing videos? Where's the porn? Where is it? No one's talking about it because I don't think they have it. He supposedly told Dr. Walla, and I'm going to try to do this verbatim, at least from what I read, which is secondhand, as I've discussed. I'm a sex addict. Basically, he dreamed about this age of girls and sexually raping them. Come on. Where is the evidence in all his phones? He wouldn't just be a sex addict one minute and not the other. I want to see it. They've got 20-something phones. And you can bet if they did their job right, which that I'm not sure of, they better have looked at all of it. They need to go back to study and go to school on how to conduct an interview. How about the fact that there was nothing about his Miranda? That they say, oh yeah, well, we did that earlier. Where is it? That's mind-boggling. And typically you have a piece of paper. This is how we do it. We, meaning in the FBI. You not only have the Miranda warning, you read it to them line by line. Then I ask them to read it. And then I read it. And then we go once, you have the right to remain silent. And we have them initial that right on a piece of paper. And then I have that. I put that in my 1A envelope and I have that. So no one can question, did I Mirandize somebody? Because you know what? By giving Miranda, might somebody say, no, I don't want to talk, and you might scare them? Maybe, but guess what? That's the law. That is how you protect people and their rights. They have to know and understand them. So just the fact that the whole Miranda thing. Now, let me fast forward to all these interviews. Does everyone understand that these interviews were recorded over? Yes, they were recorded on top of. So we don't have the recordings. Everybody's just brushing this aside. This should have been the largest Franks hearing ever held with what I'm talking about and what has occurred. You copied over. I've been over this before, but really quickly, when you record a statement with somebody, I'm interviewing, again, we went over how the Miranda is done. I tuck that away in my folder, which goes attached to the file, never to ever come out again until court. Now, I'll have to make copies of it so that I give it for discovery to everybody. But after either me or a rotor, a clerk does it, after that, it goes back in that envelope until court. So I have the original copy. Everybody can see it. It's their initials. Anyway, when you do a recording, again, at the beginning, you say the date, you say the time, you say who you're with, you say who you are, you say everybody in the room. You say exactly where you're at. And then you go through, once you're done with the recording, you take that, you initial it, you date it with your hand. And you put that piece of evidence in ELSHR, that's electronic surveillance, where it is kept and stored with a proper chain of custody and never comes out again until court. The ELSHR clerk makes copies for discovery. That is how you properly do this. None of this was done. And in fact, they taped over. Why did they tape over? This is one of these cases, because they were all taped over, as far as I know. They said the date range. It's 70 recordings, as I recall. 70 recordings. That is not incompetence, people. I think that goes beyond incompetence. Sorry, this case is monumentally wrong from my lens as an FBI investigator for 28 years. It's shocking. Okay, couple of other things. Let's see. Does everybody know there was a belt found under that bridge? Everybody know that? There was. We haven't heard about that. What's with the belt? Remember those marks that were talked about on the chin area? When I teach self-defense, we actually practice with ligatures. We use belts, we use cords, we use various ligatures, electric cords in my class to act out what would happen getting strangled so that people can learn how to react. And the first time you're getting strangled is in my class, not, in a real life situation, which hopefully it never happens. But anyway, my point is that belt was there. And remember those marks in class. Anybody with a chin that just slightly protrudes, this happens all the time. If you look at different photos, and I would say it's kind of gross, but you may want to look at this. People who are strangled, they often have this huge mark here on their chin or on their mouth, because when you do a belt or a ligature over and you grab, you typically or oftentimes will get this instead of the chin, or instead of the neck. It gets caught at first and then they have to go down. So you see this type of marking. Again, this lends itself to me that there was more than one person involved in this. I just still can't believe Richard Allen, 5'4", 5'5", basically Libby's height and weight, did all of this, even with a gun, which supposedly, at least according to his statement, he fumbled with the gun by the bridge. That's what his statement was. That bullet wasn't found by the bridge. Remember, they were murdered in one spot, and at least one body, there's drag marks, to another spot where they were then camouflaged with all these sticks. By the way, the sticks, I think it was testified to, were taken a day later. My understanding, it was way beyond a day. Plus, they just now, I believe this year, looked at that, rune, which I don't believe was a rune, but the blood that, again, they're saying Libby, touched and made that imprint. I think I've always said it looked like a handprint to me. They're coming out and saying that that's what they think it is. But look at how long it took them to test. This happened in 2017. This was the #1 case. This is Delphi, Indiana. This isn't New York, New York, where these murders happen multiple times a day. In some instances, it's mind-boggling to me. The lack of investigative effort and what was done in this case. How about the green, I think it was a sash, that they said just wasn't important? How do you know it's not important till you know it's not important? Could there have been a female out there? I don't know. But this case is a hot mess, period, from an investigative standpoint. Okay, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything else. Again, the ejection of that bullet. The guy was eating his feces, was wiping it on the wall. Everybody says this was for show. I personally have seen people trying to act crazy. It's very acute. It happens and then, they get back to normal. It doesn't happen multiple times. They kind of realize it's probably not going to work. To go to the depths of drinking toilet water, banging your head against a wall, this is way beyond normal. Listen, he was so out of control, they even said they had to medicate him involuntarily. What did those medications do? Those psychotropic drugs? Oh my gosh. I mean, you make people a vegetable, then you make them coming out of being a vegetable. And then, that man has been absolutely tortured pre-conviction. So whether he's guilty or not, first of all, if he's guilty, there is no punishment bad enough for him. I am all blue. I'm very conservative. And people who murder kids, that's the one case when I 100% believe in the death penalty. But you can't do it before they're convicted. And what he has gone through, no one goes through, I promise you. And to say that it's because the jail couldn't accommodate, that is an outright untruth. I know for a fact that that jail in Carroll County had those sliding doors with the bars, and there was a camera on a cell that he could have been kept at. There was no reason to put him in in maximum security lockup in a state penitentiary. It's insane. That's where the doors, there's no light that comes in. It's solid. You might have a little sliver. I was looking at Westville's. There is a teeny sliver. They're not meant to accommodate seeing your attorneys or seeing anybody. You're in lockup. He was in lockup 23 hours a day in about a 9x11 cell, if that, 9x6, 9x11. Teeny. Who wouldn't go bonkers? You're a CVS clerk 1 minute with a wife living in a normal middle-class home in existence, playing pool on the weekends. Believe me, I'm not trying to feel sorry for him if he committed this. I am saying, show me the money. I think he went nuts. Maybe I'm wrong. But they haven't proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he did. And this psychologist is worth 0 in my book. And the fact that that bullet could not leave the same markings when manually ejected, that, in my book, leaves the bullet at 0. So for me, if I'm a juror and I know this or have the opportunity to know this, but since the tool mark expert isn't allowed or the metal expert isn't allowed to testify about this, or is the jury ever going to know this? But it's baloney. So my bullet's out. And then on top of that, these confessions are highly suspect, at least from what we know. I wish I could see the people testify. I hope they put Richard Allen on the stand if he's not too medicated. Because Richard Allen, I think, is critical if he's going to get off. I think it's going to be up to Richard Allen. Let me talk about box cutters. So the box cutters came up, interestingly. And if you recall, I believe it was the pathologist changed their mind and said, well, it was a sharp edge. I think it could be a box cutter now. But that came after they would have been told about Richard Allen, not in their initial assessment. That bothers me a lot because it makes me think, did he change that and sort of add in the box cutter thing because of this statement purportedly made by Richard Allen somewhere in between wiping feces on the wall and drinking urine and banging his head against the wall and being medicated? All right, let me go on really quick. The fact the sketches, I think I touched on this before, the fact the sketches aren't shown is critical. Why? Normally, I wouldn't say it's a big deal, but this is why it's a big deal. We have a hodgepodge of descriptions of Bridge Guy, Richard Allen, the killer. It's all over the place. These witnesses did not hold up, and they did not provide in sync description information. Could part of that be because it's so late in the process and they can't remember 2017? Sure, doesn't matter. This is the evidence, okay? The other thing is the car. I want to go over, I think there were 3 cars described. A smart car, does everybody know what that is? I actually rented that. I do Turos a lot. I love Turo. It's like the Airbnb of rental cars. I just did a Turo when I was on that tennis. I don't want to digress. Smart cars look like a teeny little box. They're teeny tiny. They don't have a back seat. They don't have a trunk, really. I mean, they're just like 2-seaters. They're the cutest little things. I wanted to drive one around. I really actually enjoyed it. Got great gas mileage. An SUV was described and a PT Cruiser. People, that PT Cruiser is so unique, how it's boxy, very unique vehicle that was made. Richard Allen, as I recall, drove a Ford Focus. How is an SUV, a PT Cruiser, and a smart car equal a Ford Focus, people. Okay. I want to talk about Judge Diener. Does anybody remember Judge Diener? Judge Diener was the original judge on this case, and he recused himself. Basically, he asked off because of threats and blah, blah, blah. Okay, he got off. But you know what he did and why I wonder if he got off? He was the one that signed off on that probable cause. That probable cause affidavit, which is weak. Without that probable cause affidavit, they can't arrest Richard Allen, and they can't search his home, and they can't find that SIG. Okay, some people have asked me, well, what about Jen? Don't you think this is compelling? The little bullet, right? There was a bullet that was apparently found, like a keepsake bullet. Does everybody first of all, was it a 40 caliber? Was it a 9? Was it a 45? What was it, the same manufacturer of this bullet that they found, and why? In other words, people that I know that keep keepsake bullets, maybe it was the first time that, the first bullet they loaded in a gun. They didn't shoot it. They wanted to keep it as a keepsake. Maybe it was a bullet from their grandfather's, gun, something like that. Usually a keepsake. I'm not saying that he couldn't have had a keepsake. I'm just saying, what about all the other rounds? He had a gun. Did he have a bunch of other rounds, but just this one is the keepsake? So how would this one differentiate? Did anybody hear? Because again, this is so piecemealed in, and it's not full because the reporters, I'm not sure, or maybe they're not asking the right questions, but tell me about this keepsake. And if you know, please let me know on here. Was it the exact same manufacturer, the exact same caliber? I think that's very important, if that's really why a keepsake, if that's supposed to equate. What most do is keepsake underwear, which, by the way, are still missing. Panties. Who has the panties? Did they wash downstream? It's a possibility. I find it very interesting. I think it's a sock and panties. I find it very interesting that that's what's missing, especially when I think of BTK, Dennis Rader. Many other people who have kept keepsakes. I find it very interesting that panties are gone. Remember, at the crux of this case, this is a sexual case. He had them, or he personally did, take off their clothes. This was entirely sexually motivated. We know that they didn't sexually assault the girls, we believe, based on what the ME said. She swabbed, it's negative. So what does that leave us with? Could have masturbated there. We don't know what all happened on scene or afterwards. I will forever be bothered with the fact that they do not have pornographic evidence in Allen's phone that we've heard about. Talking to Carrie, Carrie Rawson, obviously she is the survivor of Dennis Rader, BTK. We've been cutting this up back and forth. And she said, I think, we keep going back and forth. Could this be him? Could this? This is the thing that sticks with me and with her. He's 50 years old. Well, 49. And this is 2017, 70 years ago. So 54, right? Is my math right? 55 or 45, 45. Most of the time, I can't think of one person who has committed a vicious, evil, sexual crime against two girls to this massive degree for the first time in their mid-40s. Brian Kohberger, he's over there. He's a young guy, if he's found guilty. This is highly unusual. Highly unusual. All right. I think I'm almost done. FBI was pushed out of this. My understanding is FBI was pushed out of this because Locals didn't like what the FBI was saying. And I saw the FBI agent, Cole, is on their list. I found that very interesting. I wonder what she's going to say, if she's even called. Was it to cover up some of this malfeasance I'm talking about? Why weren't experts brought in? Why wasn't better examination done? Why? And why was the Bureau kicked out? Because the Bureau is watching over top of all this, right? They don't have jurisdiction, but they're watching. They were. Let me see. I think I finished everything. Oh my gosh. Sorry he killed Abby. That's the only thing that catches my attention, because we know that Abby had much less violently seemingly attacked. It was smoother. Maybe she was, didn't fight. She had her clothing put back on, which killers sometimes do. They sometimes will cover, even when they sexually assault, rape, kill, then they go back and they kind of cover them up. Could that have been this case, that he felt bad? I thought it was interesting. That was the only thing that kind of did stick out to me. It's so ridiculous what was said about how this was cleared, that, he was cleared by a clerk. No one clears a clerk. I've said this before, in a command post setting, and what was going on there. And they were using the FBI system for keeping track of leads coming in. The only person that could clear were a couple of people. That would have been Liggett and I think there were two other detectives on the case that could have cleared Richard Allen out of that system. So it's baloney. I think somebody just doesn't want to be responsible for saying, listen, I looked at him and I cleared him, because he was cleared all those years ago. Van in the woods, I'm confused about that. I mean, his confession is confusing. Van in the woods. I don't know. Spooked by a van. I don't know. Cell service issues. I don't know if they're going to bring it up, and if the jury can't see this, but again, they did geofencing. His phone wasn't there. That's a big problem. I don't know whether I believe I read where Judge Gold is not going to allow that in. Remember, Judge Gold is not allowing nothing in. Nothing about Keegan Klein, the fact that he was communicating with Libby, the fact that they were supposed to meet up. All of that is gone. Nothing about Ron Logan. I've posted many times. I even went through on my podcast the affidavit done by the FBI pointing to all the reasons why they believed it was Ron Logan. All of that gone. Basically, he's defenseless. He's going to have to testify. Let's see. Remember Allen, when he was originally talked to, he talked about those vehicles. So I thought it was interesting that what they're saying was basically corroborated by Richard Allen himself in terms of different vehicles being there. I thought that was interesting. Let me see. Let me just make sure. Has anybody seen, because I've been looking for it and haven't seen it, what about when the gun was purchased? I know he said he had it for a long time, blah, blah, blah. I want to see the gun records. Maybe it's come in and I just have missed it. There's a lot that could still come in. If it came in, please let me know in comments, but I don't know about that. He was so when you're interviewing, and again, I wasn't there, all I could see is what was said. You're very adamant, like he was. I didn't do this. Go F yourself, fine, arrest me. That is actually what I have seen from innocent people. Typically, people who are guilty, they're trying to figure out what you know. They're hiding, they're ducking from being that strong. Not always, but I would say 90-something% of the time or more. So I'm very... when I saw what he said, I was like, oh, that sounds so much like an innocent person, just in my experience. Let me see. Oh, let me ask you this. I find this so funny. Diddy's in jail. P. Diddy, the huge guy with $1 billion who could who gang affiliations and sex trafficking, RICO charges. People would love to kill him. He's in a jail, people. Yeah. But they worried they couldn't protect Richard Allen. It's baloney. Let me see. All right. I think that's all I got. Listen, I went on a super long time. I actually have to pick my son up. My son suffered this horrible concussion. I actually posted it on my Twitter. It was head-to-head helmet. My son was defenseless. It was a punt return. Some argued, well, he should have done a fair catch. Listen, he was watching that ball, and it was a jailbreak. He couldn't imagine it would be a jailbreak. And head-to-head contact absolutely laid him out, done. But he's out of the hospital. He went back to school today, and he's calling me. So I need to go pick him up. He's not able to drive yet. Hopefully he will soon. Thanks, Caroline. Thank you, everybody who was a part of this. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go back through and read these, but I'm going to get to him right now. You guys are the best. Thanks for joining in. Sorry to get a little excited. This case excites me. I want the right person to go to jail and justice for Abby and Libby. Abby and Libby are number one on my target. It does no justice if they don't have the right guy. And right now, I'm just not seeing it. All right. Bye, everyone.